All right, welcome everyone to the second week of the Table Talk for Homeschooling. Today's discussion topic is the benefits of homeschooling as well as dealing with doubters. We have four different panelists joining me today to talk about their experiences. We have Lori, Vicki, Heidi, and Tara. So we're going to start with just going through and talking about why you started homeschooling. So Lori, we'll start with you.
Okay, so I have 6 children. Right now their ages 19 to 31, and we homeschooled from pre-K through graduation from high school. So I think initially we homeschooled because we had seen other families who were homeschooling. So my husband and I, before we even had children, thought that might be something we wanted to do. It was important to us to pass on our values and our faith. And I thought that's probably the best way to do it is when I'm with them, being able to impart those values to them as I'm teaching them. I also am a teacher by degree. So I have a love for education and teaching. And so it was a natural fit for me. And we just continued on because those were the goals that we were able to achieve.
Great, thank you. Vicki, how about you?
Well, we started homeschooling before it was a craze, probably in around 1986. So we were among the first wave, and it wasn't something that was common. So I had not heard of anyone having done it before. We were new Christians, my husband and I, and we went to a church where they were discussing this. A lot of people were discussing this, and we thought, wow, that's such a neat idea. And we wanted to instill Judeo-Christian values in our kids. We wanted to have a close family. And it just seemed like I had a hard time leaving them in the church nursery. Okay, so how was I going to send them off to school? And so we just kind of maybe fell into it, if you want to say. But it just kind of fit us. And I also am a teacher by degree. I never wanted to be a teacher. On the other hand, I said, I'm going to get my teaching degree, but I don't want to be a teacher. So I ended up teaching and I loved it. So it's really been a wonderful experience for us. And I am a teacher from day one. I mean, from the moment I get up until the moment I go to bed at night. And as I said, I love it.
Great. You mentioned earlier that your children are now homeschooling.
Yes.
Is there reasons because they were homeschooled, or did they have other factors?
No, the reason is not because they were homeschooled. In fact, I didn't really think that they probably would. I had one daughter that always wanted to go to public school. Finally, we gave her the option when she was in 10th grade, and she declined. And she did send her children to public school for the first 2. She has 7 now. So the oldest 2 she sent for perhaps 2 or 3 years. And then she just felt the calling from the Lord and urging from her husband to homeschool. And so they took them from the public school system and started homeschooling. But the others, I think they're more concerned today about what's going on in the public school system. And I, as I said earlier, I did send your questions out to my 4 girls because they are they're in the battle right now, whereas I'm not. I've been finished for at least 10 years. So I wanted to get their input, why? What are you doing this for? And they all love it. I don't see them stopping, but they have many benefits that they listed. But
great.
That at least gives you a little background.
Yeah, great. Thank you. Tara, why did you homeschool?
Well, I have 2 boys, and interestingly, my husband and I didn't have necessarily great experiences in public school, even though that's what we did was go all the way through public school. He was also in private school for a time. So I think that we had heard some people talking about homeschooling, and we thought, what is this thing that we've heard about? And so had a friend who was homeschooling, and she really kind of took me by the hand and said, you can do this. You can do this. And repeat after me, and she taught me to, just very basic stuff. And so I think with her encouragement and the fact that my husband's experience in private school was not, it hurt him. And so just some negative experiences, we felt like homeschooling would be the opportunity for us to really give our values, teach our values to our kids. So it all kind of combined, and that's why we got started.
That's great. Heidi.
Well, I have two daughters. They will be 30 this year and 27. And I was working full time when my girls were little. And I had a friend who was homeschooling. And so that's kind of how I was introduced to the whole idea of homeschooling. And then there were some other women at our church who were going to be starting homeschooling right around the same, with the children the same age as mine. And but because I was working full time, I knew that I wouldn't be able to be as accessible in volunteering in a school situation as I would have liked to have been. And so I thought, we decided, okay, we'll try it for a year. And then after each graduated from high school, we decided, yep, that was a good idea to keep it going. And so that was a lot of the main reason. Selfishly, there was this little part of me that knew the first time they came home and said, well, that's not the way Mrs. So-and-so said to do it. I knew that would be really a frustrating experience for both me and my daughter. So I was like, I want to be the one to, understand what they're learning. And then like the other ladies have said, it was very important for us to be able to instill our values and our faith into them. And honestly, just the area where we were living, the quality of the education in the school system, that was also a concern.
All right. Well, thank you. We will transition into our topic for today, the benefits of homeschooling, as well as dealing with doubters. So to start off, and if we end up talking over each other, we'll go person by person, but for now, just whoever wants to jump in can jump in. What types of benefits have you noticed yourselves?
I have, I'll just say that probably the number one benefit I saw in my kids was that I knew them. I got to enjoy them, and I actually loved having them with me. I loved going to the grocery store together with them. I loved going everywhere with them together. And so I knew my kids really well, and I got to enjoy the time. It seems it's such a short time really that your children are with you, and then they're grown. So that was the number one benefit for me, was I got to know them.
I think a number one for me, besides being able to share our values and faith, which was number one, but the relationship that they were able to build amongst themselves as siblings, the time that they were able to spend together made them best friends. So that was really priceless to me.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, I would agree with you, Lori. My children are all best friends with one another. And I think that only happened because they spent so much time together. Mm-hmm. They learned to love each other. My oldest daughter, I was at her house last week, and I heard her tell one of her children that your family are going to be with you forever. But your friends will probably come and go. You will have friends in this season and friends in that season. So you need to build a relationship with your family. Mm-hmm. And so the fact that we are a close-knit family has been wonderful. And I do attribute that to homeschooling. In addition to that, I say that they learn to be responsible, they love learning. All of my children love learning. And they're responsible, they're good citizens, apart from being believers and having a local commitment to their church and raising their families, loving their families.
Yeah, I would say in addition to that, I would agree with everything else that's been said. But I would say too, it was beneficial for my girls in that it gave us the time to really devote to the things that they were interested in studying. And so that when they got to college, they were prepared for, they were music and Spanish majors, double majors. Both of them had the same interest. And having that time in our schedule to be able to do those things, those extracurricular activities that they might not have had the opportunity to do had they been in a traditional public school setting and having to come home and do homework. And so we were able to finish up their studies in time that then they were able to include those extracurricular activities. And the other thing I think I've heard both my girls talk about, they really felt like they were better prepared for college in that they were used to being independent workers. They didn't require a lot of hands-on assistance to get things done. And I know some of that's just personality-wise, you've got motivated learners to begin with. But it was a real blessing that helped them set their schedule and be able to get their college work done as well. And then lastly for me, I loved the field trips. We would go on multiple field trips. My husband and I are both history buffs and love historical sites, and so we did a lot. We were living in Maryland at the time when the girls were little, so I decided, well, if we're going to learn Maryland history, which most fourth graders learn, we're going to learn Maryland history. So I picked a place in every county in Maryland. Now, it would be harder to do in Virginia because there's a lot more counties in Virginia. But I picked a place in every county, and we visited literally every county in Maryland and learned something about the differences among the counties. And it was just a sweet, sweet time. And even now, like a day like today, I might get a call from one of my daughters saying, Mom, today feels like a field trip day outside. And so it was a lot of sweet time together as a family.
Great. Is there anything that you all have noticed that you and or your family has had more time for because of homeschooling besides, being together?
Well, the field trips, like Heidi mentioned, you're not restricted to a set schedule. And so there is more time for that. One of my daughters mentioned to me that they love snuggling in the morning, taking the time to do that, having a Saturday morning style breakfast daily, just having more relaxed time together as a family, because you don't have to keep that tight schedule to get on the bus and get to school on time. So that would be one thing that they mentioned. And I would agree with that too. We did a lot of field trips as well.
I know for us, before the children were older, so elementary age, before we had them in a lot of programs, we were able to take our family vacations on the off season. So we saved money. It wasn't as many crowds. So that was it. That kind of went away when we had high schoolers and they were in like the chess program and the program that they did. Another thing that I really, it kind of goes back to what I said before, they had time to play. They were not 6 hours doing school. So they had time to play with each other. Legos was a big deal. And I ended up having 3 who are engineers, you know, so building things, making things, models, playing, doing art, those type of things. We had time for it in the day.
Mm-hmm. And I think about like every December, we would do, you know, the core subjects, but then we might take a little bit less time on some of the other subjects so that we had time to make homemade Christmas gifts for the family members. And I loved the flexibility of the schedule that did allow for us to have that time, and even spending time with extended family members. Both sides, both sets of grandparents lived, the furthest was an hour and a half away. And so we could flex our schedule so that if we needed to go up or wanted to go up a weekday, we could do that. So it was really important. And now, when my older daughter and her husband got married and they were deciding on where to live, they were like, well, we need to be back in Virginia because both sets of grandparents, you know, both sets of parents are in Virginia, and we're going to want, you know, they wanted that relationship for their kids too.
I think the only thing I might add would be that we really enjoyed the time, we took time to read together, read out loud. Mm-hmm. And we didn't stop that at, you know, even in high school, we were still tackling some pretty hefty books out loud just because we enjoyed the time so much. Mm-hmm. And it gave us a chance to all have our minds on the same thing. Like, oh, we're all reading Les Miserables, which about took us out, but hey, you know, we did that thing. So, you know.
One of my daughters also mentioned that by being together all day long, that they have more time to work on communication and working out difficulties that arise always between siblings. And then the other thing that she mentioned is that there's more time for hospitality as well.
There was something else for us as well. There were a couple of events that were taking place, or Bible studies and whatnot, during the day at our church. And so because my children were free, they were able to help with the childcare one day a week. And that was invaluable help for the church, but it was also invaluable for my children to learn how to serve, to learn how to take care of children. And so that was a plus.
Well, with 6 kids, they probably learned that at home.
This is true.
You know, I always had my children structured, you know, who was in charge of the younger ones when I was with an older one, who was in charge of fixing lunch, you know, all of those things.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of skills that they learn other than just bookwork. Mm-hmm. And it's life skills.
And the other thing that actually Laurie just reminded me of was, I guess it was when they were juniors and seniors in high school, both girls started teaching piano lessons to younger students. Mm-hmm. And that was just an opportunity that they would not have had if they'd been in a traditional school setting. And so it taught them, you know, the responsibility of being on time, of being a responsible teacher. And I think it really, you know, it helped them monetarily, but it also helped them just in terms of just knowing how to run a business.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. That's great. Does anyone have anything else to add for the benefits? If not, we'll move on to dealing with some doubters.
I'll just add one thing, which was a different thing that had been commented to me at different times, was when my kids communicated with adults, they were not afraid to talk to adults. So it was an interesting side thing that kind of happened. And I think because they spent more time with me as an adult, they had better communication skills with adults. So
yeah, I've had the same comment, Tara, where people have been like, oh, they really communicate well for their age.
Yeah.
Is that something that you all have noticed from like a young age, or were you getting those comments when they got older, or anything like that?
That was when they were younger. I mean, it didn't stop, but yes.
Right.
Yeah, I would say both.
Mm-hmm.
I also see that in my grandchildren, though, the ones that are homeschooled. And they're young. The oldest is 13. So yeah, I do see that with them. They really aren't afraid to talk to other people and to be outgoing.
Sorry, I had to mute myself there for a second while the phone rang. That was great. So moving on to the second part of our topic, dealing with doubters. What is the number one thing that you have had people assume about homeschooling?
Socialization.
What was that?
Socialization.
Yes.
That's what I was going to say.
Socialize.
Which is,
I think, though, Heidi, that I would not say that that is today the issue, because you know, our kids are out and about all the time. Schedules are so different. It used to be when I was homeschooling that I would not take them to the grocery store during the day when school was in session, or I would get questions about why the kids weren't in school. And but I don't think that's the case today. There's so many homeschoolers and there's so many different schedules that it's pretty common to see kids out and about when you're out there. But socialization, I know. And when they locked the schools down this year, I'm thinking, okay, what about all those, you know, concerns about socialization? And you're doing the opposite. You're saying this is good to be at home by yourself virtually. So what goes around comes around, I guess. But yeah, the socialization when we were homeschooling, I think Heidi, maybe Terry, Laura probably was the issue. I did ask my girls that. Did someone else want to say something? I don't want to interrupt.
No, go ahead.
No. I did ask my girls, and I have one daughter who had children. I think I mentioned it earlier, they were in public school. And they came out of the public school system. And she says, whenever anybody says something to them, they say they love it. They have so much more time to play, to be outside. They don't want to go back to public school. But this same daughter said she also tells people that it's not for everybody, that you have to have a calling and you have to have support. So if you and your husband are not, if not on the same page about it, then it's maybe not for you. So, and maybe it's a season too. You know, for her, it wasn't the season when she put her kids in public school, and they had great experiences in public school, honestly. So I can't say that she took them out because of the public school. She took them out because of her feelings about being the one to be in control of what her kids were learning and who they were socializing with. So yeah, that's, you know, just a consideration, because it is hard. It's not for the faint of heart. It's hard, but it's rewarding, and it's the best thing that I could have ever done. I have to say that.
I would like to say about socialization, I think the concern is that people think that kids will not learn how to communicate well with others, but actually children learn socialization skills from their parents. They don't learn positive things necessarily from their peers. It's the parents who are teaching them, hey, this is how you respond when this happens, this conflict, or somebody says this to you or whatever. So children actually learn positive socialization skills from their parents, just like they learn how to brush their teeth and how to set the table or whatever else it is that you're teaching them. So that's a myth out there, but I think that's the other thing I think people are wondering with socialization is, well, how can you go, will you kids be able to go to college? I think they're worried that colleges only accept people who have gone through traditional school, and that's not the case. actually, many colleges are seeking out homeschoolers now because they realize that these kids are already well prepared. They tend to be self-starters. They are independent learners. A lot of them are leaders. The local Northern Virginia Community College, all their student leadership roles a number of years ago were filled by homeschoolers. So this homeschooled kids were going in and actually taking leadership roles among the student population there, because they're used to learning and starting and, you know, taking their own initiative and stuff. So it's really not the case. Homeschooled kids go lots of places now. And there's actually a really awesome report that Homeschool Legal Defense Association published called Homeschooling Grows Up. And this can be found on their website, hslda.org. They did some research and followed 7,300 adults who were homeschooled to kind of look at what were the results. You know, were they glad they were homeschooled? Thankfully, 95% were. And they asked, you know, looked at, did they go to college? What were the percentages? Things like that. And actually the results are that homeschooled kids have a higher percentage of actually going to college, of being engaged in civic affairs, you know, joining organizations and all that sort of thing. So anyway, I would encourage you to check out that if you like numbers. If you're a numbers person, there is actually research to prove it.
And I'll be posting that on our website next to the video for anyone who needs it.
Yeah, I told each of my children when they were making their college application essays, I said, use your experiences with homeschooling. Don't try to hide it, which at first they were like, I don't know. But, you know, it's like, no, use what you've learned. And, you know, I think that helped them. Another doubt that I see that people ask about is, well, are your children going to be able to deal with the real world? You know, are you keeping them sheltered? And for us as a family, our children, we live in a neighborhood, so they played with neighborhood children. They were part of the local sports community teams. So we were not isolated at all. And the thing that we found is that when issues came up, we knew about it because we were around each other all the time. So we were able to teach them and explain to them and share our values with them. So they very much dealt with real world issues. We didn't try to hide it. And I think that it was valuable for us to catch those conversations, maybe even at a younger age than they would have normally. We would have even known that those thoughts were going on because they weren't around us.
So, Vicki, you mentioned it briefly with your grandchildren, but how did your kids respond to the doubters? Did they sometimes just brush them off? Did they actually, you know, say we love it like Vicki's grandkids do? What all have they done?
So I had some of mine, and it seemed like the boys at about 14 started to resist. You know, so they did. I had a couple that just really wanted to go to public school. So on the beginning end of all that, they would probably not have said that they wanted to or appreciated homeschool. However, on the back end, one of them has 3 children and one on the way. He's homeschooled his first son, you know, so he gets it. And the second son is the same. They don't have children yet, but they see the benefit, they see the value in it, and they get it. So.
We did have family that was skeptical at best, doubtful. They never, I should say, we never felt like we were ostracized or anything, but there was always that element of, this is so weird. This is so different. Are you sure this is the best thing for your kids? You know, both my parents and my husband's parents, we just knew. They didn't say anything to us, but we just knew. And it's funny. They came around because they saw I even had an aunt say something to me once. I can't believe, you know, that your husband did this and your kids. And I just used to think that your kids were going to turn out weird and different. And she says, but look at them now. And so, you know, like you said, Lori, it comes around.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, it takes time. You just, you know, persevere with what you believe to be right. And gently, you know, we never had any confrontations of that sort. It was just skepticism, I guess you want to say. It was different when we first started. It was different. Not, you know, most people weren't doing this. Today, I don't think that that's maybe such an issue. I think some of the other issues might be like getting into college or just being able to succeed.
Some of the things that I remember hearing were, oh, but your child will never get to ride the school bus and they won't get to experience the cafeteria. And, you know, when you stop and say, did you really enjoy that when you were going to school? You know? So those were probably the first things that people didn't enjoy doing. And
yeah, or I had the prom, you know, like, and I'm like, you do know that there are girls who don't get asked to their proms, right?
mm-hmm.
And so it's like, it's not all, you know, necessarily a rosy situation, but,
right.
you know, they were involved in organizations. There's one homeschool group called Hope in Manassas, and they did put on dances, and they, you know, so there were definitely opportunities for them to do those typical high schooly things. And I, like Vicki, it was, our family never really said that they were skeptical, but you kind of knew that they were a little bit skeptical until, you know, and it didn't take very long. They saw, you know, the girls, how they were reading, how they were interacting with other people, and then they were like on board.
I think one of the things just to mention is that no system is perfect. I mean, the public school or private school, there's no education system that's perfect, and neither is homeschooling. So, you know, yeah, there are going to be challenging days, and maybe you're going to see a homeschooling family out there and you're going to go, well, they're really undisciplined, or I don't know what you might see, but that's probably not the majority of homeschoolers. So there are outliers who look really different, and, you know, but one of the beauties of homeschooling is really getting to choose, you know, what you value and giving that to your kids. Some people see a lot of value in doing things very differently. So, okay for them. But, you know, most homeschooling families I know are just really invested in their children, and they want the best. Just most parents do. They want the best for their kids. And so it gives them that opportunity. And we, you know, things like the homeschool group that I work with, Chess, has a National Homeschool Honor Society. Well, you know, that's a cool thing to be a part of an organization that's well known, and you get to do, you know, service projects, things like that. As a group, you can get together. So there are many, many opportunities for homeschoolers to do everything, if not even more than what they might have the opportunity through other school systems.
They probably have more opportunity because of the time, the freedom with regard to time spent traveling to a school and back, and just the time spent there.
Yeah, and having been, I taught first grade in the classroom for around 8 years, and you gain time from not having to deal with classroom management. And so I kind of forgot to mention that. I talked about the flexibility of the schedule, but I mean, when I was teaching my girls first grade, we got first grade done in probably a half or a third of the time, because I wasn't having to say, okay, sit down in your seat, pay attention, look at the board. You know, there was just not classroom management issues to deal with. Excuse me. And then talking about other organizations, like my girls were involved in, excuse me, in 4-H, which they wouldn't have, I don't know that we would have had the time to do. Excuse me. And that was great for them. They learned public speaking. They were able to do service projects, gained a lot of leadership skills through that. And so, yeah, I think just like the Honor Society and things like that, there's multiple opportunities that they can be involved in to gain those necessary life skills.
You know, just one thing I'm noticing is that all of you have an education or background in education, and I do not.
I don't.
Oh, you don't? Okay, but you said you taught in a school. Okay.
Well, I taught after my girls were out of school, and I have a background in social work.
Oh, okay. So just to dispel the idea that you have to have a background in teaching, I do not have a background in teaching, and I do not have a college degree. And that may raise a big red flag for everybody. However, I can read, and so I could teach my children to read. And I know how to barter. In other words, when I get to a place where there's something that's hard for me or that I don't like, I can look at a friend who says, well, I like that. And I can say, well, I can swap with you. So at one point I swapped with a friend, and she taught my children piano, and I taught them her kids art. So because I could do that. So, okay, I just was able to give something. One year I swapped house cleaning for piano lessons. So I gave my time so that, and plus finances were tight, and that allowed me to get what I needed for my kids. So there are many ways to approach it. I also have, most of the time I homeschooled my children, I worked part-time. And so we had the flexible schedule thing. Sometimes they go with me. They do school in the car a little bit and that sort of thing. And so it just because you have to work does not mean you cannot homeschool. Just because you don't have a teaching degree does not mean you cannot homeschool. It's about the desire. And, we can be creative and find ways to get our kids what they need without it always being us that provides it all.
Yeah, and just to piggyback on what Tara said, like I said, for probably the first 6 to 7 years that I homeschooled with my older daughter, I was working full time. And my husband was working full time. So they would either go to a grandparent's house or to another in-home family daycare where they would do their homework during the day, and we'd have school at night and on Saturdays. So it can be done, without a doubt, it can be done. And both girls, like I said, college graduates on their own, they're not still in our basement. And then, like Tara was saying, I joke with people that because the girls were Spanish and music majors, I really had nothing to do with that except write the checks. And but it allowed them to have, homeschooling allowed them to develop those interests. And they're both using their degrees that they've gotten. So.
Well, it's a lot of fun to learn with your kids.
Mm-hmm.
And you do learn. When you're a teacher, you learn. And it's good for them also to see that your eyes are opened wide at learning something that you didn't know along with them. And I think, it creates a great memory, really.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
and
I think
smarter by teaching your kids, for
sure.
True. Yeah.
Yeah, you do. You learn as you go, and you're not jumping in and all of a sudden you're teaching chemistry. Like Tara said, there are other people there are other classes you can find in the area. But, if you're starting with a first grader, you're in first grade. You've already gone through first grade, first grade. So you can communicate that. I think in this current environment, there may be parents who are not happy with the school system. So they don't necessarily feel a calling to homeschool, but they feel like we need to do something. And so, you know, all of us are pretty much veteran homeschoolers by heart, but that doesn't have to be the case. So I think that, you know, as you think through what your options are, don't take homeschooling off the chart, which obviously you're not. If somebody is watching this, they're thinking about it. But just consider you can do a year by year where you try a year, see what's out there. I would strongly recommend finding groups to connect with who are also homeschooling, because you can learn so much from that. Finding classes and just see how that year goes, and then just move, you know, year by year, step by step.
Great. Oh, Tara, I think you're muted if you were just talking.
Just saying, that's good advice. Sad.
Yeah, definitely. So we're getting close on time. So I just wanted to kind of wrap it up with a final question of what types of tips would you give new or potential homeschooling parents about looking for benefits or dealing with people who are doubting their decision to homeschool?
I would say, as far as looking for benefits, don't look at what you're leaving behind. Look at what you're moving towards. Look at the good that there's going to be some challenges, but look at the good. You're going to have time with your children. You're going to have so many wonderful positives come out of it. So don't let somebody's doubt take that away from you. And people's doubts can be resolved in time, and, you know, be kind always when you respond, but ultimately you as a parent have the responsibility for your child's education. And thankfully in the state of Virginia, you have the right to homeschool, and that is not dictated by the county or you have the right in the state of Virginia to homeschool your children. And so take advantage of that if that's where you're being led.
And even as a mom or a dad teaching homeschooling with their kids, you're going to go through doubts. There are going to be times when you think, oh my goodness, am I doing the right thing? Am I hurting my kids? Am I doing enough? You know, today was such a wild, weird day with so many interruptions. We didn't even get school done. So, you know, I think those things are gonna crop up. But what you have to realize is that you really are doing what's best for them. You have their best interest at heart. And they're learning something. Maybe they didn't learn math facts, but they learned something today from all the interruptions. How did you handle the interruptions? They learned a lot from that. Whatever the interruptions were that they didn't get done. But I think you need to realize that you're gonna have doubts. Even my daughter here, where I am in Tennessee this week, you know, she goes, I just feel like we're so behind, like we're not getting everything done. But I look at what she's doing and I have so much admiration for it. And I see what her kids are learning and how she takes time to stop and correct them and help them to get along with their siblings and how they need to handle those types of conflicts. It's invaluable.
I think too, finding good support system, especially if you do have others in your everyday life who tend to be doubters, it's good to connect with other homeschooling families that are doing it, and to give yourself grace, to realize that, you know, every day is not going to be all sunshine and roses, that you're going to get frustrated with your children, they're going to get frustrated with you. Math was always the bane of our existence. And that keeping your eye on the real goal, keeping your focus on why you're doing what you're doing.
Mm-hmm. And I think, like Tara said, as well. There is no perfect. So, you know, there's no perfect homeschool, there's no perfect public school, there's no perfect private school, and everything has its own hard. So just understanding that there are failed days in public school, there are failed days in homeschool. So just understanding that, and it's a big picture. It's the marathon picture.
Mm-hmm.
Great. Well, thank you all so much. That will conclude it for today. The next session will be next Thursday, May 27th, and the topic is homeschooling styles. So please tune in if you guys are interested in watching that. Otherwise, this one will be placed on our website and YouTube page. And then the article that Tara mentioned earlier will be placed there as well for anyone's reference.